Hello everybody, I'm at Becky's ranch. We're going to do, that's Lulu, that's Becky and Hans there. We're going to do our weekly Thursday little talks that we have. As I was driving out today, I'm working on a lot of videos and I put one up and then I got to do one. And I normally don't have anything on purpose that I plan. But as I drove out, I thought I'll also add, those of you that are watching the Samuel teaching, during the talk, I'll kind of do chapter 9 of Samuel, but it'll fit in. I'll kind of, Becky and Lou, I might do like a little review of it real quick, like I did on the Book of Ruth. But, so that came to my mind as I was coming out, that I'll stick them both together, because I'm doing the Gospel of John, I'm doing Samuel, now I might do a new meeting. Let me mention real quick, my daughter didn't see my tattoo until just now. I was like falling asleep a little bit on the couch. And I wanted to explain it actually. When I talked to Austin, because I didn't explain it that well, but when I talked, the tattoo stands for, those of you who watch all the videos, you know, it's Corpus Christi Outreach Ministries. But some of my friends, Austin I think is in jail. You saw Austin on some of the videos this last year. They got the tattoos because they joined gangs. And some of the guys, it doesn't affect them, but like Austin, he wanted to get away he wanted to burn the tattoo off of him, the one he has. He even used my propane torch one day in the garage. I didn't know what he wanted to use it for, but that's what he was wanting to do, to burn it. He didn't burn it off, but he burned himself a little bit. It would be very hard to burn a tattoo off. Now those guys, and you just saw Lance on the other video, some of those guys, they feel like they're marked because they have certain tattoos for the gangs they join. So I actually told Austin and some of the other guys over the years, I said, you know, we might eventually do a little tattoo just to identify that you're like in a Christian group, Christian gang, Christian group, just because that's part of the whole thing that they get into. And so I've actually seriously thought of that. That way, you know, even if years go by and the guys have it, and some might do well, some might not do well, but it'll be a reminder of Christ for them. It will. When I showed my Popeye tattoo on the video where I got that one, I still remember when I got it. I could still remember the Lake Geneva in Illinois when I was in the Navy, and so and that's really the reason I wanted to make that little effort. And I don't mind having that. That's okay. I might even get a cross because Mike's a good tattoo guy, and you saw him do this one. Let me mention this. I remembered. I went to H-E-B in Port Street of Corpus. It's kind of a H-E-B I used to take the guys when I was doing the halfway house to that little H-E-B, and you get better deals. And one of the guys, there was some guy there, I didn't know him, but I was in line. He said, brother, can you, he was a big guy and a white guy, Anglo, and he said, can you text my girlfriend from your phone because she's not answering from his phone? And I said, brother, I wouldn't do it. I said, I got a lot of friends of mine. I used to lend them my phone. I worked with the halfway house. I used to do AA. And then he wanted to listen. He's like, oh, really? And then he asked, he says, I'm in AA. Now, look, he was buying 3 beers. That's all he was buying from the store. But he said, I'm taking a little break today. But he knew, he asked some of the names, because maybe he thought I was faking it. But he could tell after I talked to him. I said, no, I've been working with. Then he asked if I knew Jude. I said, yes. I said, Jude, as a matter of fact, is staying on the street at my friend. Oh, I thought he was in Chicago. I said he was. He came back here. Then he was going to move to Mexico. So as we talked, he wanted to buy me all my food. I bought like $20 of food. And he said, brother, I'm going to buy that for you. I said, no, I wouldn't let you buy it for me. But it was just interesting because he knew all of the language, knew a lot of the friends, many years. And I don't fault him that he was buying 3 beers. He kind of he made a little excuse for it. And as you know, I've talked about a lot of those issues. So I just wanted to mention that. All right, what did I tell you to remind me of, Becky?
The Purge.
Oh, okay. They were talking about a movie, The Purge, and what is the movie about? Say it again.
So it's about America. They decide to do, I guess, 24 hours of where all crime is legal, including murder, and that's their reason as far as how to deal with the financial issues that America was going through. And so basically, because the rich people can protect themselves, they can afford security systems and guards and whatnot. All the poor people die. And so they say, in the movie they say like,
well, that's what we got from the first one.
Yeah, that's the first one. Yeah, the third movie, The Purge 3, we have not seen yet, so we're gonna go see it.
And so it's lawlessness for 24 hours, basically. And you said what else? That it's during an election, like?
Yeah, well, The Purge 3 is election year purge or whatever.
Okay.
And so I believe what's happening though in the movie, because the second movie, there's a lot of people, like the kids, the younger generation, that were like, this is ridiculous, this is crazy, people don't deserve to die. And so I think Purge 3 election year is more people fighting back, that they don't want this to happen anymore. This is cruel. Only the poor people are dying. The people that can't defend themselves are dying. And
I think part 3 is new. I think, from what I've seen, I think it's supposed to be. I think somebody wants it to stop. I think that's what I got. And they don't want it to stop. I think they're trying to get.
Now the reason I said, remind me, because she said it's criminality, 24 hours nonstop, election year. Basically, I was going to say it's almost a factual movie of the Hillary Clinton campaign. Get away with crimes, get away with everything. And it's an election year.
But
I watched.
You can't kill the people up top.
yeah, you're not allowed to kill anyone like governmental officials and stuff.
I wrote a note on the post that I posted today, which will be 3 days earlier when you see this. I wrote a few little news notes. It was interesting. And at NBC News, which is world news, last night they had an interview with the Syrian president Bashar Assad. It was kind of surreal because Bashar Assad was sitting down, and he's done it before. Charlie Rose has interviewed him. Bashar Assad is the listen now, he's the so-called crazy nut of Syria that we're trying to kill. We're not trying to get rid of him just to step. We're trying to kill Assad right now. But he does interviews. He was an eye doctor, ophthalmologist, trained in the United States. I don't know if you knew that. And if you listen to him talk, he's speaking like any president would speak. And he's sitting down. I guess he took a flight to the United States, unless he took the interview over there somewhere. Now, of course, there's issues in his country. Why was it surreal to me? Like unbelievable. Hillary Clinton referred to this man, Assad, 5 years ago. She called him a reformer, and that he is just basically a good man. That's what she was saying. Now, of course, she's changed her tune. And it's surreal because we are actually not just trying to get rid of him as president. In his country, right now, there are a bunch of terrorist groups. We call them freedom fighters. And they are attacking, with our airplanes, the areas where we're saying we're hitting ISIS and so forth. But they're also fighting, if they can, to kill this man. Can you imagine an American president sitting down for an interview and then another country is actively trying to kill you? Now, the U.S. really doesn't want this man, Assad, to be speaking like that. Because in the interview, they didn't show the whole interview, but he said, look, we have a destabilized country, which is true. I have defended his point of view for the last year and a half. And he says, you in the U.S., you can't just come over to another country. And the rebel groups in our country who are trying to kill us, destabilize our country, you in the U.S. are providing them weapons, guns, you're flying over them, you're their air force effectively, and you're trying to kill us. We are. And when you put a face on it, you could have done the same thing with Libya and Gaddafi. I did the same thing recently with Iraq, explaining we made a decision in various areas. Now, we have a lot of good Christian men that fight in our military. And on the other video I made where I was racing the quads, I made a video I'm racing quads. I didn't get to talk too long on it because it was windy out there. But I talked about a prisoner of war movie that they showed at Church Unlimited, which was a good movie. But it showed one of our American captives that was a prisoner of war for the Japanese. And of course, in our country, we had a big debate over waterboarding, which was, should we use waterboarding, which is considered bad on terrorists, like if we capture them. It's considered torture. Waterboarding is this. I don't want to do a whole debate on it. Waterboarding is the people, reporters have gone through waterboarding, just to get the example. And you're on the ground, they put a towel over your face, and they pour water on the towel. Now, when you're under it, I could waterboard myself right now. I could do it right now for 1 minute. And when I'd be done, you have a hard time breathing. Now, granted, when we were using that technique under George Bush, the captives that we had, it was a debate. Because it makes you feel like you can't breathe. Okay? Now, I could do it to myself and I'd be talking to you like this. Well, it became such a debate that some in our country said waterboarding, because we consider it torture, is like the worst thing anyone could ever do. It would be so unrighteous to do it. And the reason I was upset when I commented on the Prisoner of War movie, because it also depicted a U.S. prisoner of war in a Japanese concentration or Japanese prisoner of war camp. We in our minds think to kill, for me to get a gun or a bomb or a drone, and to actually kill you, that's considered just, okay, and acceptable. Now, if I happen to be part of a country, whether it's the U.S. or any country, and if that country engages in an unjust war with another country and kills people and bombs them and shoots them, we don't consider that unjust. We actually consider that, the American populace considers the killing of people that are innocent as acceptable. You don't know that, do you? That's why I told you there were Iraqi soldiers that were Christians that served under Saddam Hussein. We killed them. We killed them because we simply said, you're part of his army, and we're going to start a war with your country because we think you might have weapons of mass destruction. And Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq at the time, said, you, United States, are nuts because I don't have these weapons. We want you to show us those weapons. Even if he had them, all of this is a game. Weapons of mass destruction, chemical weapons and all, that's considered bad, like waterboarding. But a nuclear bomb, which we have 7,800, Russia has 8,100, something like that, nuclear war, that's considered acceptable to have that. To shoot you in the head with a bullet or to drop a bullet, that's acceptable. We in the United States think that's acceptable. If I were to ask you right now, those of you that have been influenced by all this propaganda, if I said, I want to take 2 of your children and we're either going to waterboard them for 1 minute, which most of you think is horrendous, or we will shoot them, what would you prefer? Every one of you that is so anti-waterboarding, you would pick that over shooting them. But yet we shot and killed, because it was unjust what we did, innocent people. And most of you think what we did was good. Most viewers of the media, this is manipulation. This is manipulation on a large scale. And when I saw Assad, and why, John? You say, don't we have the right for self-defense? Of course we do. But self-defense isn't going to another country, whether it's Vietnam. Why did we get engaged in Vietnam? Were we defending ourselves? What was that called? Do you remember anybody? I'm sure my daughter doesn't realize it, but those of you in my generation. We had a war in Vietnam, not because Vietnam did anything to us. Muhammad Ali, who just passed away, he lost his title because he was a Vietnam War protester. And he said those people never did anything to us. And then I think he served some time in jail, Muhammad Ali. And then he regained the title after that. Why was he protesting the war? If you listen to what he said, they showed a lot of his clips recently. He said, they've never done anything to me. The reason we started a war in Vietnam was because we didn't want the communists to take over that country. And this was called the domino effect. So we said, because communists were indeed taking parts of Vietnam, so Vietnam became split, North and South Vietnam. Look, we have North and South Korea. So our involvement was, we want to prevent the communists from taking it over, so we're going to go into war there. Yeah. None of that is just killing. None of that is righteous killing. And when we went into Vietnam, which is the initial, war where people began questioning, and you had Nixon and you had a lot of politics, Americans began asking themselves, what are we doing? Why are we allowing people to die and sacrificing lives? And I don't think we learned lessons. I was mad when I saw George Bush the other day on the video I commented on Obama's speech at the Dallas Memorial for the 5 cops that were shot. But I saw Bush up there. And, Bush, because of the actions, stuff I'm talking about, when you have any opinion like you're a macho thing. I remember when we went to the war, and as a result of our wars, Al-Qaeda and other groups threatened they're going to come back, we're going to come back strong. And I remember Bush made a statement and said, come on and get us, we're waiting for you. He said that. And he got criticized because Bush was not waiting. Our men were waiting. Our people fighting. But that's the whole macho image. And so I just wanted to say we think certain things are unacceptable. For instance, why do we really want to kill Bashar Assad? Why are we backing up people trying to murder that man? Because we said he might have chemical weapons, and he might have used those chemical weapons on his own people. And there was a question whether or not he used them or some of the other groups used them just to get us to go into a war. But regardless, why do you think it's more just to shoot a kid, even if it's accidental, and for him to be dead? We think that method is just. But if you have a chemical weapon, we can't, the standard norms of society can't stand for that. The standard norms of international law also can't stand for unjust wars where people are murdered and bombs are dropped. And I didn't mention this in the other video because it was windy. You say, John, you criticize too much the U.S. Do you know after we dropped the 2 bombs in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which is the only time in the history of the world where nuclear weapons were used on that type of scale, which is the greatest death from a weapon of mass destruction in the history of the world, because you had 100,000 killed in the first city, 80,000 in the next, but after the fallout of all the radiation, some estimates are over 1 million died. When we dropped those bombs, we targeted civilian cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We targeted those cities. We knew we were going to kill every woman and every child. We knew that. That wasn't collateral damage. And we did it because we felt that's how we're going to end the war. So we justified killing kids on purpose. It was an accident. We took those 2 cities out to send a message to Japan, you better surrender. And most people don't know this. After Japan surrendered, after the surrender of Japan, do you know we dropped leaflets from our planes in Japan saying, you have surrendered. And do you know, along with those leaflets, we drop bombs. We dropped leaflets in Japan after they surrendered to let the people know in Japan that their country surrendered. With those leaflets, after they surrendered, we dropped bombs with them. Why? Why did we do that? We were saying, F you lost, you surrendered, we blew up 2 cities already with nuclear weapons, weapons of mass destruction, and then after they surrendered, the leaflets that landed after their surrender were dropped with bombs. What was the justification for that? Why would we still kill them after that? So, those are some issues. Propaganda makes people think certain things are acceptable and certain things are not. Jesus said in the gospel, there will come a time where you think killing disciples or followers is doing God's will. And most of us read that in the gospel, and we have a certain scenario how that played out. But did you, Christian, reading your Bible, did you ever think that that might be actually you? You say, what do you mean? Okay, Jesus said in this book, there will come a time where you can be so manipulated that you might think killing a fellow Christian is doing God's service. Now, I just gave you a fact that we did kill some Christians in Iraq that were soldiers of Saddam's army. I gave you that fact, and I also just showed you that that was an unjust war. And how many of you never questioned that until now? How many of you think that the killing of the few Christian soldiers in the Iraqi army was good? Some of you thought that until I just gave this to you. And Jesus said there's coming a time where those who kill Christians will think it's justified. And you never thought it might apply to something like that, did you? So some of you actually thought the killing of some Christians in the last few years was good. And it wasn't. So you in that one area, you got duped, just like the scripture warns other people get tricked. So you might have justified that. All right, I want to do a little bit of, let's see, how long we go, 22. Becky, you're always hogging the video. Now I wasted 22 minutes. I'm going to talk about Samuel a little, but... Oh, the watch. I forgot. I want everybody to listen closely. I had an old watch at the house, a Timex watch that I bought many years ago. But the watches I like are the ones with the twist bands, because I get impatient, and if I can't get the little latch off, I wind up breaking it. So I had one with the twist band. Well, I'm also very cheap. I want you to know that. So when that little Timex watch, which cost $19 or $21, when that watch finally stopped, well, the wristband actually broke, and I glued it. I glued it with Gorilla Glue because it was a band like this. It's a new one. But I still saved it. And not only did I still save that watch, but when the battery died, I still kept it, and I bought another watch, like a little, plastic thing. Well, that watch broke too because the band broke the other day or something. So I came out to the ranch here, and I said, I want to get a battery for this watch. And it's kind of a beat-up watch. The band is glued. And I said, but maybe I can get a deal. So we went to the Walmart, and they had the battery. And so Lulu was helping me put the battery in. But I couldn't snap it together. And I knew I was going to get impatient because you had to get the back of the watch on. And so we're driving in the truck, and I'm like, well, I could wait till I get home, but then I had a little vice grip in the truck, and I'm trying to vice grip it, and of course I broke the lens of the watch. And so then I'm frustrated, so I wasn't mad, but the battery, the new battery that cost me $4 and all, I just threw it out the window. I said, no, this is it, I can't keep it no more. And then I found this one with the band and everything for $12.
Oh, yeah?
And I realized it's probably worth about $20, but it's Mexican. It doesn't have the days Monday, Tuesday. It's got Domingo and everything else on it. But I didn't care because it had the band and it had, everything.
Yeah.
So I tried to save money, and I wound up throwing it out. That did happen.
$12 for that.
Look, I wanted to do a little bit of Samuel, and then we'll do some issues, because it's a few minutes I went. I've been teaching Samuel, and real quick I'll do a little review. In the book of Samuel in the Bible, Samuel was a prophet that God, one of the prophets that God raised up, and I can't review it all, we're in chapter 9, but at one point, God's people, the nation of Israel, they said to Samuel, we want to have a king. We want to have a king like all the other countries have a king around us. Well, Samuel said to them, and this could be like politics, Samuel said, why do you want to have some man rule over you? Why do you really need some man to be over you? God's already over you. God's done all these great things for you. Well, they said, no, we still want a man. We want to have a man over us, king, like all the other countries. Well, then Samuel told God about it, and God said to Samuel, they have not rejected you, Samuel. They rejected me. But go ahead and tell them I will let them have a king, but he's going to take advantage of them. He's going to use their resources for his own kingdom. Everything's really going to be about him and about his image. And it's not really going to be the concern for the people. It's going to be the higher-ups. That's basically what he said. So, in chapter 9 of Samuel, this is Israel's first king. And that's kind of what I wanted to cover. Now, the people already decided we want a king. God told Samuel, I'm going to let them have their request. If they want to have a king, I'm going to let them have a king. And in chapter 9 of Samuel, I usually put both chapters together, like 9, 10, but we'll do 9 real quick. So Samuel is at the point in the Bible study I've been doing on Samuel where he's going to pick the guy. God's going to show Samuel who the king's going to be. And in chapter 9, there's a man by the name of Kish from the tribe of Benjamin. And he has a son by the name of Saul. And one day, this man Kish loses 3 animals, 3 donkeys, asses, it says. And he says to his son Saul, go find the donkeys, go find them, they're missing, I don't want to lose them. So now, he goes on this little journey, and there might be a point or two, if I remember, at the end of the chapter. So the journey begins for Saul, thinking, I got a mission today. What's the mission, Saul? I got to go find the 3 animals that are lost. That's what I'm going to do today. That's in his mind. He's got that set. So he takes a servant. They start looking for the 3 asses or donkeys. Well, they go to a couple of cities, and they can't find them. And Saul, the son of Kish, says, we better give up on this project of finding the 3 lost animals, because it's taken so long, my father's going to worry about us instead of the animals. And the servant says, but there's this little town, now this is Samuel chapter 9, there's this little town and there's a man of God there. And the things that he says come to pass. So Samuel had a reputation as a prophet. Now, the servant says to Saul, the son of Kish, the man who lost 3 asses, the servant says, before we give up, why don't we go ask this prophet guy, and maybe he'll tell us. And Saul says, well, how are we going to pay him? We're running low on stuff. And the servant says, I have a quarter of a shekel or a fourth of a shekel, which is like 16 pennies, okay? Says that we'll do that. We'll bring that. And it says, in those days, it says they used to go to the prophet, but he was called the seer before he was called a prophet. S-E-E-R. And I used to read that over the years in the King James Bible and say, what is a seer? And it simply meant he could see. Or he had the ability to have visions, prophecies, dreams, and things like that. So they go to the little town before they go back to the father, Kish, and say, we give up. They go thinking, let's ask this prophet, this man of God, maybe he can help us with the 3 donkeys, the 3 asses. So they go to the town, where Samuel the prophet's at, and they ask some ladies, some maidens, they say, we're looking for the guy, is he going to be around today? And they say this, and this is important, don't miss this. They say, actually, he's preparing for a special type of a religious feast. It's a big thing in the town. He's going to come do the sacrifice, the people are all waiting, nobody's even going to eat until this is done, this particular thing, and the only people that are going to get to go are those that are bidden, those that have invitations. It's RSV, or whatever you call it. You know, you got to be special to get an invitation. Now, this has already taken place as Saul shows up. They already have some big thing going. And so he lucks out. It happens to be like, yes, the prophet's going to be here. He's been preparing. Everyone's waiting. This is a big thing. This reminds me real quick, let me say it. There was a Catholic priest by the name of Padre Pio. Okay? Now, Padre Pio, a lot of Protestants are going to have a big problem, but I'm not going to go through all this. Padre Pio was one of the priests who had what was called stigmata, where he had the wounds of Jesus in his hands, and they would bleed. Now, Padre Pio, and I would study a lot of church history, and a lot of Protestants are going to say, these are all of the devil. I don't want to do all that right now. But Padre Pio also was known as a priest for gifts of healing. And I've watched and read about him, as well as all church history. But there were also people that when he was a priest in a regular parish, there were people that knew that he had like prophetic gifts, charismatic gifts. And I remember one of them was, there was a story where a man was in a hospital, but he was in a hospital in another place, either another city or another country. And the man got healed because Padre Pio came into his hospital room and prayed over him. But Padre Pio was never there. Padre Pio, the priest, was in either another state or city or country. And so there were stories that were very supernatural that occurred with this man. But I remember hearing once, this is why I remember it, he, from the Northeast area where I grew up, he was going to visit Jersey City. Now, he was very famous. He lived in the 20th century, this priest. But he was very famous for all these types of things. And he was going to go to Jersey City. And as he was going to Jersey City, if I remember the story right, it's either about him or another famous priest, but I think it was Padre Pio. There was these huge crowds. Now, Jersey City is one of the towns you see me on the videos when I make videos in New Jersey. And there were these huge crowds, everybody in the streets, a lot of traffic. And Padre Pio said to one of his priests that were with him, he said, oh, they must be having some big thing going on today, like a big parade or something. And the priest said to the Padre Pio, he said, they're all here for you. They heard you are coming. And he couldn't understand that because all of the miraculous things that were happening with him, he didn't see it as that he got fame. He didn't know it, you know. Now, how does that fit in with this chapter, Samuel 9? Saul shows up, I explained, looking for the prophet Samuel, and they're already having a big thing, like a big celebration, going to get ready. But it was all about him, and he doesn't even know it. Because when he goes up to the prophet Samuel, he says, I'm looking for the prophet. And Samuel looks at him and says, I'm the guy you're looking for. But I have this special meal. It's all prepared. We made plans on it ahead of time, before I ever even met you, Saul. And I'm going to invite you and your servant to come to this meal. And Saul just thinks he lucked out, like he had an invitation to a special festival. And then when they go into the room, there are only 30 people that are invited. And there are these two chairs. And the prophet Samuel says to Saul, you and your servant, you sit in the top chairs. And it reminds you of the parable where Jesus said, when you are bidden to a wedding or a banquet, somebody invites you to something, don't take the high position. take the low position, and then the person who invited you, he will come to you and exalt you to the high position. And that reminds me of the parable. So Saul is kind of surprised and says, why are you doing all this? And Samuel tells him, God had already told me that you're going to be the king. This is going to come up in the next chapter. But God already told me that you're this special one. So Saul, all these preparations were being made, like the Padre Pio thing. Everybody was there really for Saul, because the new king is finally going to be revealed. And it said it says he was handsome, a goodly man. He was taller than everybody else. From head and shoulders, nobody was as big as him. It reminds you of the Roman Emperor Maximus. Maximus, I believe it was Maximus, because the title also would fit, big. But he was considered like almost maybe one of the giants, those that had something that some of these guys had that disease that Andre the Giant had. Some people in Scripture, like we read about Goliath and his brothers, that they were from the family of giants. It's possible that they had that same type of thing that Andre the Giant, the wrestler, had. But Maximus was a Roman emperor who was big, huge. Saul kind of fits that. And so he was like, to look upon was outward. But this is the guy we want. Now God's going to pick Saul. This is just chapter 9. But it was interesting because the journey that he was on that day had nothing to do. Samuel even tells him, he tells Saul, forget about the donkeys. Get your mind off the donkeys. Now Samuel's a prophet. He said, your father has found them. And then they were cooking like food, a shoulder roast, just in preparation for Saul. The whole thing was about him. He didn't even know it. And then they put on the table and say, take and eat that which is left. And there's a verse that says, I remember I read it years ago. It says, these were the sons of Noah that were born after the flood. And it reminded me, if you go through things in life, and then you come on the other side of the flood, forget about everything before, eat which is in front of you right now. Paul says that this one thing I do, the Apostle Paul says, I forget about the things that are behind, I reach forth into the things that are in front of me. So Samuel the prophet says to Saul, take that which is left. There's something here, and get your mind off of those donkeys. And oftentimes in our lives, I'll make it practical, you might be on a mission to do one thing. Oh, I'm going to start this, or I'm going to do this business, whatever it is. Many times, the whole reason you got involved in that first mission wasn't because of that mission or that job you got. It was to get you to the next place where you would then have another opportunity down the road. But if you're going to move ahead with the next opportunity, you have to get your mind off the donkeys. In the midst of all of the stuff that Saul was happening, like everybody's here for you, Padre Pio, everybody's here for you, Saul. Even Samuel, the great prophet, said, God showed me, he spoke in my ear about you. And Saul still got his head on, oh wow, this is so great, but I got to go and wander. Forget the donkeys. That's nothing now. Everything, there's something else that's in front of you. So that's Samuel chapter 9. And a lot of imagery, if I read the chapter, a lot of imagery reminds me of the parables. Because Jesus himself says, talks about calling people to the wedding. Everything's ready. Only those that are invited can come in. And a lot of the imagery of the parables I see in this. At the end of chapter 9, we don't get yet to the main reason until next chapter, but I happen to be in chapter 9 right now because I read it last night. And in chapter 9, Saul and the servant, after all this happens, Saul and the servant are getting ready to leave. And Samuel the prophet says to Saul, let your servant go, but I want you to stay right now behind, and I'm going to now show you everything that's in your heart. And then we're going to stop on that because I'm just doing chapter 9. But what he's going to show him is the calling, that God had a calling for him to be the king and all. But he says, I'm going to show you what's in your heart.
But Saul didn't even know any of this was going to happen. So how could all that have been in his heart? It says, God chose us in Ephesians. It says, God chose us before the world was made, not only to believe and be saved, but for a purpose. And so even if Saul didn't know all that was in his heart, Samuel the prophet was going to tell him, in essence, this is your purpose. This is your calling. This is why everything happened up until this stage of your life. So the prophet Samuel is going to reveal that to Saul, and that's chapter 9. Now, any questions, comments?
We're going to have to do chapter 10 next time.
Oh, I am going to, chapter 10 will be done, like, before I come out here. So come out here. I'm looking at these little quick notes. All right, anything else?
Did we hear anything about any corruption
Any corruption issues?
in the area? Huh?
Yeah,
Nah, I don't think too much.
oh, the dog.
Oh,
Driscoll
that's
dog?
right, the Driscoll police dog.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, about the guy, how he...
I posted the
returned
link.
he returned in the dog, but it wasn't the original dog that he had. So, I mean, I would imagine that. I guess, he probably sold it.
Driscoll is the town. Actually, I posted the news links on Driscoll. That's the little town that they pull people over all the time on the highway. I've been talking about it. And then you had the fire chief, the volunteer fire chief in jail. He's in Oasis jail for sex with a minor. You had the police chief in Driscoll resign because he was accused of going into the drug evidence locker. Well, it's the same little town. It was right by, not too far from Kingsville. But now, this week, you had somebody that had the drug dog. I thought they said maybe he had the dog died or lost the dog. And so he got a fake drug dog that he thought would look like the other one.
Yeah.
And he brought that one in to work, a cop. So they caught him with that he was lying about that.
Yeah,
I don't know
guess
what's...
that's real corrupt over there. The issues and whatnot. But I know that the Jim Wells County Sheriff as well, they elected, or they put somebody in there for like interim Jim Wells County Sheriff.
Yeah.
And so as soon as he was brought in, what's ironic is that the Jim Wells County Animal Patrol Officer, which is the original Oscar Lopez, he was a sheriff that just retired. It was his grandson working for the Animal Patrol Department for Jim Wells County. He was the only Animal Patrol officer for Jim Wells County. So I guess they fired him, and they got somebody new in, and then I guess he's going to be the one that's going to Alice, or in Alice, where the other ones that got fired or whatever. And I just thought it was funny because it's like, man, talk about getting in the office right away and getting rid of people, it's just like, it is a whole bunch
I
of...
think it's going to happen a lot once the new sheriff comes in.
Yeah.
There's going to be,
Well, I don't know if Danny Bueno's going to be any better anyway. It's just, it's like when somebody gets elected into office, it's like their posse is the one that moves in and takes all the jobs so they can make sure that they can do what they want to do in government-wise and get away with the things and whatnot that they're doing. So, you know what? Also, too, I did hear yesterday that detention center that they were doing in Jim Wells County, now it's moved over to Duval County.
Oh.
Yeah. So I had heard that the reason why they said
Sure, it's still on.
she said no for the city manager for San Diego. The reason why she said no to the detention center being in San Diego was because she knows that the guy, I guess, that was going to be in charge of it was going to basically try to launder money out through the back door, because I guess he's been doing that with several other things in the area, and I don't know if she has control over firing this guy or not, but she has control over yay or nay if something's going to come to her city, right? So she didn't want that to happen. And so it's funny now that it's going over, it's just right next door to Duval County, and it's just going to be probably in Freer or something like that, and another little city over in Duval County. And I'm just like, man, it's funny that they just moved it right next door, because it's like the same people are probably going to have their hands in the pot to do something, to try and get them to launder money out the back door or something. But I guess it's because it's going to be governmental funded, I believe.
Oh, yes, if it's detention
so
center.
the detention center will be funded by the government, and I guess that's probably a lot easier to launder money out the back door. Or not really launder money, but steal money. hey, say this is how much it's going to cost you to build, and then
I just thought I'll end with this little story. At the firehouse in Kingsville, we used to take our fire trucks to the city garage, which was the warehouse, the garage, where we also had the fuel pumps. It was off of Corral Street in Kingsville. So we used to fill up the fire trucks, fill up the ambulance at the city garage. And I used to call the guy down there. His name was Juan. And I'd say, oh, this is John at the firehouse. We got a problem with whatever. We're going to drop it off. We got to get a tire change. He was a nice guy. And I went over there a lot, because there was stuff. But one time we had a little controversy. That guy, John, who ran the warehouse, the garage, he actually took, parts for vehicles for himself. So, you could order a starter, you can order a tire or whatever, and you're ordering it on the city's budget, but maybe he did he did a few things like that for his own personal vehicles. Normally you'd get fired for that. But what happened was they had a city council meeting. I used to go to those meetings with fire departments. And we used to watch them also on TV if we were on duty. But what they did was, I think they simply said, promise you're not going to do it again. I don't think if they made him pay back, maybe they said you got to pay back the money of the starters or whatever they caught him buying. And they said we had a talk with him, and he was an employee for many years. And they just simply said, we're going to forgive him. And he kept his job. And I wasn't upset about it. I knew him. I knew him a lot. But he was tempted to take it because he had the opportunity, if he needed something for his vehicle, I guess, just order it on the city's dime. And that was a case where they just forgave. They just forgave. They didn't keep going after. They didn't keep saying we need to get something out of it. And I remember that because most cities don't do that.
Yeah, no.
And he was there. And he was there for many years.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, in most cities, having a history like that, it'd be hard to get another job running the city department. But in Alice, that's considered a good part of your resume. I got a history of being a crook. Oh, we want you in. Come on now, I'm just kidding. All right, we're gonna end with that. Say goodbye.
Bye, y'all.
All right, I might see that movie with them. God bless everybody.